Hey, Steers Chapel, this is Don Pierson, and this is Friday's devotion. And I've got two more um, devotions on Matthew chapter 9, verse 27 and through 31. Let's read the scripture. When Jesus departed from there, two blind men followed him, crying out and saying, Son of Man, Son of David, have mercy on us. And when he had come into the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said to them, Do you believe that I am able to do this? They said to him, Yes, Lord. Then he touched their eyes, saying, According to their faith, let it be to you. And their eyes were open, and Jesus sternly warned them, saying, See that no one comes, see to it that no one knows it. But when they departed, they spread the news about him in all that city. And Jesus said to them, Do you believe that I am able to do this? And they said, Yes. This is Friday's devotion. There is, actually, there's many stories like this in Scripture, but probably the strongest story that I know is when Jesus encounters Saul on the road to Damascus. And when Saul has that encounter with Jesus, he's struck with blindness. He hears a calling from God. He's left in a blind state for a few days. God calls another man, another Christian, to go to him for the purpose of healing him and instructing him. And if you remember, that man is very, very hesitant about going because he basically tries to educate God and say, Hey, you don't know this guy. I mean, you really don't know what this guy is doing. And of course, what Saul was doing at that time, in fact, he was even on orders there, headed to find and seek out those who were Jewish converts to Christianity, to followers of Christ. And he was going to capture them, throw them in prison, and maybe even lead in their stoning or their death. But the man goes anyway. The man that God calls goes, and he sees firsthand what God has done in Saul's life, as you and I know as Paul. Now, you would think that that would pave the way for Paul with the rest of the Christian world, but that's not the case. When Paul comes into the midst of the Christians there, they're afraid. They don't want to have anything to do with him. They don't trust him. They can't believe that God has done this in his life. They're extremely hesitant in believing that God could change such a man like Paul. Now, Saul was a Pharisee. Now, not just any type of Pharisee. He was a very strong Pharisee, very committed to the law and the letter of the law. A long time ago, he lost the ability to recognize the spirit of the word. But God evidently saw something there that needed to be corrected, and God changed him. It took a while for people to believe that God could do this in this man's life. And there are so many examples that I can think of more. You understand, this is more of a indictment upon the Christians than on Paul. It is true that he had done some horrendous things and news about him had spread everywhere, but the Christians are the ones who are struggling with what Jesus could do in a man's life, which is interesting. They had experienced that in their life, but maybe they didn't think their life was as drastically or dramatically opposed to Christianity as Saul of Tarsus or Paul's was prior. Every now and then, I will hear someone talk about another individual that's just become a Christian, and the way they'll talk about, well, I wonder how long they'll last now. I wonder why. I really don't think they're going to be able to stay through. I'm not sure, and on and on and on, all expressing doubt about a work that God has done in their life. Even if they never voice it, I've noticed how cautious Christians can be with some people who have been redeemed versus others. Now, if it's a good person from the community that they consider good, then and they find out that person's been redeemed, then man, it's wide open arms. But if it's somebody that they're aware of that maybe has been living a little too much in the world as far as they were concerned, maybe an adulterous affair, maybe in homosexuality or whatever, I've noticed that we have a tendency to doubt. Now, we would never say that. We would never say that, I don't know whether God could change that person's life. But our actions and the way we treat that person is much more cautious. Sort of like the Christians did Paul. And then all of a sudden, out of the midst of us arises a Barnabas. A man who really has the kind of faith to believe that, you know what? I believe God can do this, and that God has changed him. And then Barnabas will step up into that individual's life and form a relationship with them. And because of that Barnabas, the other Christians around, eyes are open to the power of Jesus doing this. Doing this. I suppose I'm a little slow too. It's one thing to be slow and hesitant when the individual is proving something other than the fact that they're walking with Christ. But there's no justification for you to be hesitant until you see that. I'm not talking about perfection. Don't hold them to another standard than what you hold yourself to. I think some fall away because there aren't many Barnabases in the church today. There aren't many Barnabases that are able to believe that, yes, the Lord has done this in their life, in somebody else's life. Not many of them anymore. Though we're supposed to be a people of faith, I think we still walk around very guarded and walk in a life of disbelief about what Jesus can do in the life of someone else. You see, Paul wasn't the only one that Jesus did that for. He did it for Peter. Made him a rock. He did it for Nicodemus. He did it for Mary Magdalene. And he did it for me. And I hope he's done it for you. So shame on us when we doubt whether he can do it in somebody else's life. Love you, Stewart's Chapel.